Hey, you ready to start? Yep. We're going to plug you into the speaker. Sorry.
Everybody, here's Hiba. She's gonna read to you your essay. In here.
Awesome.
Okay. We're gonna get you all plugged in to the speaker and make sure that.
Okay, you should be good.
Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm coming to you via the phone. And to make sure that everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah?
You sound great.
Okay, cool. Thank you for coming tonight to the closing of ICU. I really appreciate my time while in Portland, getting to know almost everyone of the participants in the group, and also working with Homeschool, both Manuel and Victoria. And thanks to S1 for hospital supervision and all of the labor that went into it. So thank you for coming out tonight. As part of this kind of closing, our publication is available for $1, as well as I'm just gonna read like the kind of the intro essay to you all. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'm also coming via my phone because I just moved to the eastern side of Ontario in Canada and don't have internet yet. So I thought the best way for me to be visually present with the conditions that I have is through the phone and kind of being there to my voice. Kind of going back to the way the scheduling of the course was designed, because we did all of our reading groups online. So kind of doing a full circle in this way. So, when our online presence is constantly tracked and surveyed, how do we negotiate our dependence on the internet? This is one of the questions we explored during the ICU course at Homeschool. Networks of surveillance and control are a part of our everyday, affecting our interactions with all devices. The internet serves and provides connection as much as it gathers data of our physical and digital actions. And technological surveillance has overrun. We are surveyed every day by friends and family, by, quote, tradition, and by our own choice, as we survey ourselves in the mirror, examining our flesh and features. Involuntary surveillance is not a new concept, but the way technological systems enable mass gathering of data is a manifestation of the current neoliberal age. Even people who do not have access to the internet are a part of it. For example, with Facebook, those who do not have Facebook accounts have, quote, shadow profiles. that continue to accumulate data. Pre-internet notion of anonymity does not exist, since anonymity has itself become a choice produced through data scrambling apps like TrackingNot and CashFlow. These are two of the apps we talked in one of our meeting groups around what it means to not be tracked and what kind of things we need to use in order to do that and what does that really look like. Because these are essentially data scrambling or accumulation scrambling applications, TrackingNot and CashFlow. ICU simultaneously refers to being made visible, being invisibilized, and the array of gray area points in between. For example, historically, optical technologies were not set up to capture non-white subjects. In photography, the history of optics illustrates that the eponymous Shirley Card standard was institutionalized in the mid-1950s by Kodak, where color formatting and flat photography were best formulated to capture a light-skinned subject. Accurate flash photography for more melanated subjects was not produced as a consideration for darker-skinned black and brown people due to chocolate. On Colonial History's Instagram post reminds us that Hershey, being one of Kodak's biggest clients at the time, was capable of accurately capturing a different look of their varieties of chocolate. In 1986, due to concerted social pressure, Kodak released Kodacolor VRD film, which later was called Kodak Gold. It was able to capture, quote, photographs with details of a dark forest in a low light, end quote. This history of being invisibilized continues to be present as Simone Brown speaks in her lecture, where she cites a YouTube video shared in 2009 that features two HP employees, quote, White Wanda, end quote, and Black Desi, end quote. And using, at the time new, HP MediaSmart computer facial tracking software, in the video, the webcam is pointed at the two employees, surveying the space. It recognizes Wanda's face, but not Desi's. But do black and brown people want to be, quote, seen, end quote, so better data can be gathered on them? Shouldn't they have a plethora of choices in how to be visualized, both through data and optics? We continue to live in a culture where explicit boundaries are perpetuated. Pick a side, man or woman, black or white, surveyor or surveying. ICU, as a four-part series, serves to address the role surveillance and application play in everyday through two online reading groups and open source workshops featuring Unity, a video game design application, and studio visits, the exhibition at X1, which you all are part of, and a publication with Letter Kutcha, which is available tonight. Participants of the exhibition are engaged in both local and global dialogues with fan cities including Portland, Chicago, New York, and Seoul. Inspired by redacted FBI surveillance papers, scholars Simone Brown's research on blackness and surveillance, texts such as Obfuscation, A User's Guide to Privacy and Protest by Finn Burton and Helen Lusenbaum, film Scenes of Black Sensitivity by Alexis Pauline Gum, and artists such as Zach Black, Cecil Cyril, Sandra Perry, and Nisha Cardenia. Participants of the ICU course will examine how different corporate surveillance are present in their lives. Artists in the ICU publication examine the history and contemporary manifestation of surveillance as a control and connection apparatus. Untitled Bite Studies, Zachary Nicole examines the archives of his Chinese and African Caribbean ancestry. His grandmother's family were chosen as subjects by German quote-unquote race scientists to conduct eugenic studies, which are part of the proven scientific and racist basis that set the historic standard for modern-day biometrics. Biometrics is a term for both body measurement and calculations, and also used to identify individuals in groups that are under surveillance. His wrinkling and folding of paper render the archived footage illegible. The intentional obscuring attests to the present-day normalization of standardized biometric passports and ID cards, and the implicit acceptance of its racist roots. Through daily social requirements such as presenting an ID, scanning our fingerprints, getting searched by TSA at airports, we are socially primed to believe that living under surveillance is quote-unquote normal. But is it really normal to create a miniature biometric photo of yourself? In our photograph series, Frame a Topper explores surveillance. The claustrophobia of identifying conflicts during the 4th of July, which shares the same title, 4th of July, and then Coin, CMAC, how immigrant trans bodies experience familial surveillance. Examining digital vulnerability, Tabitha Nicolai's photo series examines the bedrooms of her trans woman community, illustrates the plethora of metadata that manifests as a presence of the self. This also attests to the notion of truth-surveillance, or when the surveilled surveys back. In the photos, we are looking into bedrooms, but who is watching us look into these spaces? The tracking of an object, a person, or a financial transaction is to control them, but also to capture data and cast trends, as Maggie Sivit writes. She states that algorithms, instead of judges, decide if a person is guilty or not. In her essay, The Need to Know, 22. SPIN, LSI-R, and other risk assessment algorithms owned by a private corporation, Orbis Partners Incorporated, used in Chicago, Cook County, privileged white defendants over Black by giving them a lower risk score. Maggie speaks about questioning why these algorithms are put into place and addresses the lack of transparency of how they are practiced and implemented in Chicago and Cook County courts. Tracking and risk-ranking algorithms effectively turn people into data sets. This aspect is highlighted in Eric Capel's Spring Studies, where he surveys colonial bodies brought to Europe as quote-unquote tourist attractions in the 18th century. His graphic lines abstracted bodily forms and templates them, potentially signifying straight lines or lines of flight, or the segmenting of data from their source. Similarly, Matthew Ward's appropriation of CIA, FBI badges illustrate the contradictions of the visibility of power in the title, White Fragility, Weaponized Youth Military Imperialism, 2018. With the eBay purchase badge, the right to survey can be bought and sold, but ultimately not practiced by those who purchase the badge. The government's data cannot be bought as is visualized by the redacted list that features attractive activists online and the race paper published by Colors of Change and the Institution of Constitutional Rights. But the citizens' data can be easily accessed through clickbait, disinformation, and address revenue metrics. Refers to the power of information to create digital quote-unquote worlds and inspired by Alexis Pauline Dunn's Still Season 5 Sensitivity. Devondre Harris, in her Zodiac Collage series, examines the delineating of stars and their projection onto Earth. Do they survey humans the way humans survey them? As space-aided satellite technology has enabled global governments to claim they quote-unquote own space. Tim Combs' manifesto lays out a treatise on the notion of subalternity in contemporary digital aesthetics, while Matthew Henderson contextualizes his decision to cut into an LCD screen and ruminates on the familiarity and estrangement of the screen's quote-unquote vision. He examines the notion of sight as it links humans and machines, and also his discoveries as he learns about the layers of glass and the wires that constitute the screen. Through divergent responses of religious text and video, participants have examined authoritarian racist frameworks as well as their quote-unquote networks of social relations. They posit that networks are not neutral, The networks of surveillance and obfuscation are defined by the relationships and statewide infrastructure. As systems, they enable tracking and control of data, but also facilitate our connection to one another.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eva.
So if you want to reread that or just check out what I'm talking about, I just read the beginning essay of the IC publication that you can purchase and check out tonight.
Kenny's gonna read something next. If you want to stay on the line and listen, you're certainly welcome. Of course. Hiba.
I'm gonna read the title essay from a new book, Incalculable Loss. This book is a collection of critical prose about art, technology, racism, capitalism, topics that we all think about. But this essay in particular has a lot to do with issues of surveillance and issues of tracking people. It's called Incalculable Loss. The algorithms that make up big data distribute publicity for death across the population in state surveil. Once upon a time, the virtual represented a domain of free play, a realm separate from the flesh, quote-unquote second life. But the corporatization of digital architecture and the advent of big data have ended this digital dualism. Now, as former NSA Director Michael Hayden says, we kill people based on metadata. Now that digital activity is the basis for state violence, the virtual and the flesh are no longer separate zones. Through mass surveillance, the virtual makes the flesh more vulnerable to death. The flesh lends its reality to virtual populations. This link between surveillance, data mining, and death has birthed a new form of necropower, which is Achille Mbembe's term to describe the politics of deciding who lives and who dies. This new term I like to call algorithmic necropower. The data mining procedures used by the NSA and other entities draw their predictive power from the use of incalculable algorithms, enabling them to replace causation with correlation. They rely on numbers instead of theories, using huge data sets culled from the surveillance of online activity. Big data algorithms can discern or generate correlations that would not be apparent to human perception. They test rules against these correlations. How likely is it that someone who spends an hour on the slots will spend 20 minutes playing blackjack? How likely is it that a college-educated ethnic minority will read the New Inquiry if they also read the Wall Street Journal? He mentions the New Inquiry because that's a bunch of The predictions that emerge from these correlations and rules are free of context, but when interpreted by humans, become the basis for advertising campaigns, urban planning, actionable security decisions, and many other aspects of modern society. So this idea that things that are context-free become part of the context. Really important parts of this. Long before big data yoked together calculation and incalculability, French philosopher Jacques Derrida described justice as, quote, a calculation within the incalculable. Because every demand for justice is singular, there is nothing it can be fully compared with. It is incalculable because no other thing can enumerate the content of justice. In this light, the algorithms used in big data appear as a kind of perverse instance of justice. The relationship between big data and the incalculable algorithms that host it are reminiscent of their Derridian relationship between justice, the singular demand, and the law, or the rule that singularity is held to. The law proceeds according to rules, but justice cannot be arrived at through the application of the rule, as Derrida states. Justice is always singular and always grounded on its own impossibility. It requires an incalculable decision that we can perform only when at a loss, unable to speak and calculate. But even an incalculable calculation needs a rule. So we still need the law to guide us to justice at the limits of what can be calculated. So kind of Derrida's argument about justice is an incalculable calculation. Both mathematically and juridically speaking, powerful tools for modeling, predicting, and manipulating human reality have emerged from these limits of calculability. The history of computation is a prime example. The power of language to quantify and exploit life. If language allows us to articulate possible worlds, and the ability to calculate possible worlds at the scale that algorithms allow changes the human relationship to history and futurity. While we grapple with the incalculable, our algorithms can articulate worlds beyond our grasp, keeping track of gray zones between finite states, places that human understanding can't go. Because of how human intelligence works, our logic has to start from the rule of law, from finite states and binaries, even if what we are seeking is the incalculable Derridian justice that exceeds law. But algorithms able to contain the incalculable can start from the ground of incalculability. Despite the oppressive uses big data is put to, this capacity ironically seems to bring it closer to Derrida's understanding of justice. In reality, managing incalculability becomes the basis for new automated modes of organized control in an alchemical process that distills history into a usable data set. What remains of actual justice when the incalculable can be made now? Algorithmic necropower, the computation of who should live and who should die, operates from the basis of incalculability to discern quote-unquote non-obvious associations. According to the US Inspector General, association, quote, does not imply a direct causal connection. Instead, it uncovers, interprets, and displays relationships between persons, places, and events, unquote, aka metadata. Algorithms escape the laws of cause and effect and operate in a fluid state exception, encompassing the financial sector, the military security nexus, and the entertainment industry. Although algorithms seem to allow big data to bypass human judgment, in fact, a huge amount of labor is required to map associations and interpret their output. The algorithm itself has to be written by a human, and even then it only spits out data. People still have to decide what that means. Ordinary language and the ordinary actions of digital citizens act as a database for algorithmic necropower to manipulate reality and generate threats for metadata. Risk levels are rated based on activity patterns that to humans seem anomalous in relation to norms derived from data. The norms, or the data relations, are what determine suspicion of terrorist activity, not causal evidence. The March 2013 watch listing guidance, 2013, I wrote this in 2014, so it's outdated, but still relevant. The March 2013 watch listing guidance, a leaked government guidebook for putting individuals on terrorist, no-fly, and selectee lists, says, quote, although irrefutable evidence or concrete facts are not necessary, to be reasonable, suspicion should be as clear and as fully developed as circumstances permit. The document also has loopholes for cases where officials cannot articulate reasonable suspicion. Family relations of known or suspected criminals and terrorists, individuals who may be, quote, associations or associates of terrorists and criminals, or individuals with a possible nexus to terrorism may all be watch listed. Reasonable suspicion is thus a computer-aided human judgment, not based on causal evidence, that is to say facts, but on data correlations, on perceived deviation from data represented norms. Everyday behavior becomes a means for the state to detect threats, a measure of risk. This architecture distributes complicity in a new way. In terms of necropower, Bembe's concern is, quote, those figures of sovereignty whose central subject is the generalized instrumentalization of human existence and the material destruction of human bodies and populations, unquote. Who are these figures of sovereignty when data appears as sovereign? Who kills in algorithmic necropower? Is it the people who coded the algorithms, the generals, managers, CEOs, shareholders who ordered them, companies buying and selling the algorithms? The civilians who surveil daily lives constitute the bulk of the data the algorithms analyze. That is to say, our banal activities are the source from which algorithms automatically generate kill lists made up of nodes that deviate from the cluster of normal activity patterns. Algorithmic necropower defers the act of killing and disperses the complicity. For algorithmic network power, history is over. The past is not a record of causal relations, but raw material for increasing predictive power. At every turn with each monitored action, data are made calculable. As regular users of language and of the algorithms used to reproduce sociality on the internet, we fashion ersatz individualities and surveilled spaces geared toward consumption. The primary value of this online activity, from the point of view of security operators, is that it provides the norm for the data set probed by algorithms, testing and manipulating association rules. Thus, the activities of making a self and deciding what and how to consume, which are not normally considered work, and the amorphous terrain of algorithmic war stretch over various domains of modern life, such that affect itself becomes financialized, and biological life, that is to say, bodies and physical spaces, becomes surplus value or calculable, and when incalculable, become contagion. For data mining corporations, life can be categorized according to this distinction: activity which is mineable and activity which is not. Mineable activity serves as the database to mount an attack on unmineable activity, as evidenced by the NSA's increased monitoring of users of the Tor encryption network developed by the US Naval Research Laboratory, as well as the visitors of the Linux Journal forum page, which the NSA deems an extremist forum. Internet activity signaling that the user is conscious of her privacy settings off surveillance algorithms which predict whether or not this kind of user is subversively aware of the role that data plays in the architecture of war. It's this kind of the same fear that concept of the sovereign citizen plays in physical contexts transfers to the digital context of people that use VPNs, encryption software, they use onion sites like Tor or access to Tor. All of these people are put on lists that the NSA and the CIA watch. What halts the algorithmic state of exception? Derrida may provide an answer. The incalculable traces, the self-effacing cinders of language that point beyond language. Computation itself produces immense quantities of incalculable data that are effectively useless. These incalculable traces actually clog calculation. While incalculable algorithms are quanta of data that guide computation, incalculable data, their output, are simply qualia of data, groundless remainders taking up server space. They're not useful for intelligence or profit. Take the simple example of a curated Amazon product listing updated in real time. It would generate so much traffic by scraping the site to get price data every half millisecond that Amazon would have to operate at a loss to maintain the servers necessary to allow the data hemorrhage of the price mining process. There's other examples that are less financial too. Like we can look at like people shit posting online, like producing content that has no real meaning or that is nonsensical in some way, and that just takes up space on the server. But it's still expressive to people that can kind of tune in to the discourse or whatever's going on that allows them to tune in, I guess. I like to shit post too. I support it. History is composed both of things that can be known and things that cannot, mineable or calculable and unmineable or incalculable events. This latter category comprises not only things that happen without a trace, but also the traces of what never happened. Even incalculable algorithms cannot yet enter into this incalculability of experience, which we live as a mourning or a hope or other relations between the past and the present and the future that escape enumeration. Algorithms enumerate quanta of data, but the qualia of data, their output, or subjective experience of the world, cannot yet be captured by algorithms. Nevertheless, our surveilled responses to that qualia, online self-making, loops back into the quantifiable zone, as with Facebook's attempts to monitor emotional states. That sentence refers to their new, back then it was new, their 5-tiered response system. It has like a like, heart, crying face, an angry face, and a wild face. Hey, they're using it to understand how we react to stuff. So that's why I mentioned it, I guess. Now when you think about it, it's kind of like, that's small potatoes. Clearly, it was on my mind. Yet, there is always an incalculable remainder. In the face of the seeming alchemy of the computational process, forgotten or unlived histories proliferate. This remainder of computation is where justice is to be found, guided both by law and by the incalculable qualitative data of subjective experience. These qualia are not useful to algorithmic computation and are only intelligible to certain human eyes. One potential sabotage of algorithmic necropower would be for users to actively produce incalculable data. Facial warping, such as in the work of the artist Zach Glass, represents an aesthetic gesture toward incalculability. But algorithms are faster than humans and also possibly more inventive. It would be more efficient, if no less realistic, to wait for the authors of algorithms to undertake a program to sabotage themselves or encourage them. If algorithms make complicity incalculable, it is because those who make the algorithms count on avoiding complicity. The idea that the algorithm itself decides is part of our general ideological offensive surrounding the deployment of the algorithm. The politics and interests of its authors may be from this standpoint incalculable. But the person or population who is caught up in the algorithm is precisely what the algorithm is intended to calculate. The remainders of the incalculable mess of qualia, particular human politics and interests, are equally the ground of the algorithm and what will inevitably cause it to destroy itself through its proliferation. This idea that the more incalculable data we produce, the more we can clog up the servers and still kind of like live our own lives and just like be online but produce content that is useless and takes up space, or kind of like art, I guess, art objects. I mean, this is a book about art criticism, so. Algorithms straddle a gray zone between the privatization of war and the financialization of civilian life, acting as the connective fiber to fuse them in order to subjugate life to the power of death, as Mbembe says. In algorithmic war, here and there collapse. Ordinary civilian activity is a determinant source for state intelligence. Fused across finance, security, and entertainment, this relentless exercise of necropower might also be called necrocapitalism. Human life itself becomes a surplus value. At the same time, the residue of history of incalculable produced qualia, produced by attempts to read the future, become a contagion that big data is still struggling to manage. And the longer it goes on, the expansion of this incalculable contagion shows just how small big data really is. There you go. Thank you.
You have copies of that?
I do.
Buy a bundle.
Great.
How much are they? How much are the two publications?
So we're doing, so my book is 17. I see 15, tapes of 5, big tapes. And then we're doing all together 25. But also, hit us at $1. So if you want to pay $1, I'll give you a book. I don't care. Not my book. What are the publications?
Thanks. That's all.
You want?
Well, I have an essay that one of the IC participants versus ungenocide. And it's in draft form. And does anybody, maybe we can like read paragraph by paragraph? Does anybody else feel like using their voices? Besides me. Okay. I'll read it to you guys. I'm gonna stand up and do it. Okay? You ready? You ready to listen?
Yeah.
What's
I might
your
have
name
to.
again?
I'm Matt. I might have to take off, but
It's okay, Matt. Do you want to buy a book while you?
I probably
I can do that while you're.
don't let me be this direction.
Alright. Anybody else wants to jump in? Like, you're welcome to. Okay.
Yes.
I'm gonna use my loud piece. Okay. It's called American Lions, and it's, again, it's a draft. So enamored America is inviolability, so clamorous its belief in its rights to a fictive territorial integrity, so desperate in its pursuit to make concrete boundaries that don't exist, so forceful in its quest to insist that yes, these are the lines that make a perilous crossing for most. The whiteness of it all, fiction makes another fiction. For the American lines to materialize, an alchemy that refuses to yield, ever more lines, imposition of fictive boundaries in the service of real America. With every utterance of this realness, we are exposed to an absurdity and violence together unto its own. But the fiction refuses to die. Prices from Donald. Where is the American border? Ocean to Manic Ocean, the skies dissecting Alberta and Montana, or the Texas Badlands exploding with cries of souls rent asunder? Or the Constitution-free 100-mile zone stretching inward, ringing the border, where 65.3% of the U.S. population lives? The Customs and Border Protection stations in Canada, or the outposts in Abu Dhabi Airport vetting U.S.-bound passengers? In Dublin? In the scramble of make-real borders, the CBP pre-clearance facilities and procedures scattered anywhere in the world, dislocating border from meaning. For ardent border aficionados and aggressive insistence on border integrity, their physical presence ultimately loosens any adherence to the very thing they profess. Borders are anywhere they want them to be. The supposed leak they want to plug can't but usher in a leaky definition, which would be ideal if not for the fact that dislocation only deepens cavalier border. Explaining this fictive make-real border, here's CBP. Quotes, the aviation security benefits of pre-clearance are substantial because a uniformed U.S. law enforcement officer interviews the pre-cleared passenger before he or she boards. This added security layer provides an additional opportunity to detect and stop threats as early in the process as possible. In this stuttering choreography, the more closed they become, the more expansive their meaning, so much so that crossings themselves disperse, proliferate, mutate beyond specific geographic borders. Lines don't stay where they're so forcefully erected. This is, of course, deliberate. Once again, DHS firmly believes that establishing pre-clearance operations in strategic locations will assist our efforts in identifying terrorists, criminals, and other national security threats prior to their boarding an aircraft bound for the United States, and is a critical step in DHS's continued efforts to enhance national security and facilitate growing international travel. Terrorists, criminals, other national security threats, parlances of surveillance, American lines, the argumentative and moral force to defend American lines, borders. Like the dissipation of borders, these terms and what they embody, putrid in their meaninglessness, yet they persist because American lines want them to persist. Unmoored from any meaning, we have to dodge or forced to inhabit these noms de naissance as they are flung at us. There is no meaningful answer to who is a terrorist, who is a criminal, or a national security threat, but an imposition hard to escape for those who have to bear that burden. Non-white Americans, immigrants, foreigners. In preparation for or at border crossings, we submit to an ever-widening security to prove we are not threats, nor do we threaten America, never mind what it does to threaten or destroy others. What really does it mean to threaten America? From what well does the American project get its immoral impetus? Even before you encounter a U.S. border, extraterritorial or otherwise, there's the absurdity of a visa application for non-U.S. visitors. Here, more American life. Do you have a mental or physical disorder that poses or is likely to pose a threat to the safety or welfare of yourself or others? Have you ever ordered, incited, committed, assisted, or otherwise participated in genocide? Are you coming to the United States to engage in prostitution or unlawful commercialized vice? Or have you been engaged in prostitution or procuring prostitutes? Do you seek to engage in terrorist activities while in the United States, or have you ever engaged in terrorist activities? Have you ever committed, ordered, incited, assisted, or otherwise participated in torture? Beyond the practical, you answer no, because yes is an indictment, sure refusal. What's the meaning of a yes or no to these questions? When America cannot pass the test it inflicted. Only if it were possible to disallow America. Consider this a provisional entry into the making and unmaking dissolution of authorized bodies authorized by crisis and
Coming, everyone.
Okay.
Love.